Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, my name is Flight Lieutenant Peter Lisney, and in today's episode we're off to the Middle East to hear about the importance of spiritual resilience on ops. We'll also reheat a few stories just in case you missed them, but first, see if you can identify this noise. Find out if you were right at the end of this episode. Now, going on ops can boost your TAN and your pay, but the package can also include stress, danger and physical hardship, leaving you asking yourself some hefty questions. I spoke to RAF Chaplain Padre Rebekah, who told me how developing spiritual resilience can help.
To separate from their families and to work in difficult environments. He was facing life and death situations. We don't want people to be machines. We want them to be people and humans and thinking and feeling people.
Padre Rebekah, welcome to Inside Air. I understand that you're currently serving at a desert air base somewhere in the Middle East with 83 Expeditionary Air Group.
That's right, yes, I am.
So what's spiritual resilience?
Spiritual resilience is essentially understanding what gives your life meaning. It's what gives it meaning and purpose. And if you can understand the meaning and purpose of your life, then that brings enormous benefits in you flourishing as a human being. And that's why it's for everybody.
So you're saying it's across the board and not just those with faith?
No, I think it's something that gives individuals meaning, and it's to do with how humans flourish. Thinking about what it is that gives your life meaning, worth and purpose is incredibly valuable, because it encourages you to think about how you spend your time, what you put your energies towards. And the RAF has really tried to help people to consider our spiritual well-being and spiritual life in the last few years. We talk very much about people's well-being, their physical well-being. We talk about people's mental well-being. We talk about how people look after their social well-being, and more recently their spiritual well-being has become one of those topics of conversation, and rightly so.
In your travels, can you think of any teams that have demonstrated spiritual resilience?
Well, definitely. I mean, I spent a couple of years at RAF Cranwell and running around with the troops there in basic training, and I'm sure exactly the same happens at Halton and in other training environments, where people are absolutely exhausted. They've used up the last of their energy, and suddenly it's not just about the individual getting through that moment. It's suddenly about combining their efforts and coming together and supporting others, and it's invariably. It can be quite surprising, the people that come to the forefront at the times of most need, the small people, the quiet people, the people you would least expect, can find sudden resolves and reserves of energy and enthusiasm that grips the team and brings it through in a whole new way. So most definitely, and that's not just as an observer watching cadets coming through those difficult times, but I myself coming through training. I had to do the training the same as others, and I certainly found that there were things that were particularly taxing for me, either on a physical level or a mental level, where it was the input of someone else and their looking after of me that enabled me to pull through on that occasion. So yeah, I think it happens frequently in the military, in lots of teams. I was chatting to a firefighter the other day, and he was talking about a particularly kinetic environment in which he found himself in, serving alongside others, again in another sandy location, I think. And he was talking about a moment where he was facing life and death situations. And it was spirituality that got him through that moment. And for him, he was talking about it being a time where suddenly his own personal needs were absolutely put down, were his own personal needs were put to one side, and it was the needs of the survival of the group and duty that called him on in that moment.
For him, was there a religious connection there, or was it just spiritual, as in we talk about our being and who we are?
When faced with life and death situations, for him it wasn't a religious it wasn't a religious moment. It was a moment of deep inner resolve. It was the bigger picture, the greater picture of what am I doing this for? And for him, it was the spiritual encompassing was about his duty. He felt called to be in that moment, in that time, and in that situation. He'd signed up. He'd signed, for the military. He'd signed for these such occasions, and the bigger meaning and purpose was about the larger picture and the duty that he was called to carry out. So it wasn't actually put in religious context at all. But then we spoke about how he reflected on that, and in the days and weeks following, he said that he looked back at his childhood, and for him he was brought up he described it as a Christian family with a very Catholic mum, and he looks back at that and considers that that's really the bedrock of his beliefs, but it's a grounding rather than a daily practice. At the moment, I'm based in the Middle East, and I'm working alongside people who on a daily basis are having to make some pretty punchy decisions, and some of them are very young, and they're then having to reflect on some of those life and death decisions that they're involved in, and they're having to work through I guess some quite intimate knowledge of operations out here, intimate knowledge of those that they're observing, and there's a real risk of moral injury. Personal resilience and spiritual resilience is absolutely part of helping them reflect on the broader picture of what they're doing. They need to have a well-rounded and well-founded worldview if moral and spiritual scars are going to be avoided in this context. So I think that's where spiritual resilience really comes into its own, is in operational contexts. But yeah, I was chatting to a lad who's about 22, 23, and it's his first operational tour out here, and his role is as a targeteer, and I asked him to explain to me what that was, and he was all over it, absolutely brilliant. And he'd only ever wanted to join the Air Force, he'd only ever wanted to go into the intelligence sphere, and he's doing brilliantly at it. But we had a fantastic conversation about his role and what he does on a daily basis, and how he then reflects on that when he leaves his place of work. And that was a deeply spiritual conversation, as you might imagine. Because he has to think every day, what is the context of what he's doing? How is that assisting the UK? What is he feeding into the UK, into the safety of our skies and the safety of the UK? But also, how does he personally reflect on that? And they're the sorts of in-depth conversations that I'm having with people. So I think that was a particularly meaningful moment. And the military are moving more and more into a technological battle space and hybrid warfare, and situations where people are operating remotely and having to reflect on what they're seeing and what they're doing by day, and then how they frame that in the context of their life by night, perhaps when they go home to their families, or when they disconnect from that. So all the more reason why these conversations about spiritual resilience are more and more important, because we don't want people to be machines. We want them to be people and humans and thinking and feeling people and well people, and therefore all the more reason for them to reflect on some of these bigger questions, to reflect intellectually and without it creating spiritual harm.
And sharing those thoughts with others is one way of helping that process.
Absolutely, and nobody's working alone. I mean, they're working in a context, and they're working and supported by other people. It's through conversation and through opening the doors to having authentic and meaningful conversations, rather than brushing it under the carpet and pretending that we can cope with some of the stuff that we're asked to do without actually reflecting on it. Thankfully, the Air Force is a place that does try its best to take care of its people in a more rounded sense, not just the mental and the physical well-being, but the spiritual well-being as well, recognising that people are whole, holistic beings, and we need to look after people holistically, particularly when people are being asked to separate from their families and to work in difficult environments and to do some unpleasant or emotionally or physically difficult jobs.
And where can people go to find out more information about spiritual resilience?
Well, as ever, you can go to your padres and you can ask them, and any padre worth their salt will always be willing to have a conversation about your spirituality and spiritual resilience on an individual basis or a group basis. It's what we do, it's what we love talking about, it's what we love facilitating. But it just so happens that some of my very clever colleagues have put together a document called Spiritual Resilience. For those geeks among you, it's called AP 9012 and it's chapter 12. But the Padre branch have got this connected to our website, and we can send this out to you if requested. But it's a very nifty little document. It's only 4 or 5 pages long, and it's very, very readable. And it talks about what spiritual resilience is, the components of spiritual resilience, the need for it, how to develop spiritual resilience, the key attributes of it. Things like spiritual resilience and commanders and the individuals, and also about the sort of wider RAF perspective. So it puts it into context, it puts it into language that's incredibly meaningful, and you can grasp it and get hold of it either for yourself or for your troops. But we're also happy to talk you through it and broaden the conversation if required.
Do you know, maybe now is the right time to ask you, on your person, in your utility belt, do you currently have a bag of Haribo?
Absolutely, I do. It's issued.
Can we hear it so we can...
So there's something there. There's a bag there. I open my drawer. Haribos, 1, 2, 3... and 4. I hope I'm not disappointing you.
You've confirmed everything that I thought.
Have Haribo will travel. When I was about to set off on an exercise when I was based at Cranwell to help to go and visit the cadets, the current, in fact, chaplain in chief checked me for Haribos. He patted my pockets before I left to ensure that I was fully loaded, as I should have been.
He didn't check your water bottle was full. He checked for your Haribo.
No, we just borrow someone else's, don't we? Or just break the rules, But Haribos, you can't turn up without Haribos.
So why do you carry Haribo?
Well, they call it Moralibo, which I think is a lovely reflection. But it's really it's somebody different coming into usually tense, intense, and stressful environment and saying, I care about you. That's all it is. And it makes us feel less useless as well, because, we don't carry weapons or anything like that around. So, at the very least we can do is to bring something that brings a bit of cheer to people. But it's about showing that we care, actually.
While we're looking at some of the myths and legends of Padres, and we've talked about Haribo, should we call you Madre?
I love this question. Apparently, a few years ago, when there were fewer female padres in the branch, they were asked this question of whether they'd like to be called Madre. I don't know if this is true or not, and apparently at the time they said, no, we'll just stick to being Padre. But they didn't ask me, and they should have asked me, because I've always got an opinion. It's usually different, and it's usually rule-breaking. So... I often call myself Madre, and I got in trouble for this as well. Coming through basic training, there were 2 of us, a Padre and a Madre. I called myself, in fact, there were 2 of us, 2 Padres, and I said, well, I'd like to be called the Madre then, just to differentiate. And I've been the Madre ever since, but I was told off. But people will often call me Padre, and I'll sign off as Padre because people get confused. Padre means father, it's a gendered term. I've got a T-shirt that I ordered from America that's got Padre written on it, and when everyone else wears their squadron and regiment or whatnot T-shirts underneath, I wear my Padre T-shirt underneath with pride.
Brilliant. Padre Rebekah, thank you for coming on to Inside Air. Have a safe and enjoyable rest of tour in the Middle East, and we look forward to seeing you back in the UK soon.
Thank you.
This is Reheat, covering some of the stories which have made the news recently. I'm LAC Victoria Andrews. Arriving at RAF Odium in November 1980, the Chinook is celebrating 40 years in service. The iconic helicopter has seen action in every major conflict since the Falklands War. In theatre, the Chinook assists the medical emergency response teams, transport troops and tons of equipment, while at home they play a vital role in humanitarian missions. Flight Lieutenant Ewan Lister explains why the Chinook is still in such high demand.
The avionics are probably the biggest developments, modern composites and things that has just continued to enhance the aircraft's capabilities. We're now up to 24.5 tonnes all-up mass of the aircraft, which is just a phenomenal lift capability that offers so much flexibility to commanders. It's proven why the Chinook is in such demand, both in the UK for tasking and on operations all over the world.
The versatile workhorse is due to stay in service for another 20 years. RAF Marham has seen the delivery of a further 3 F-35 Lightning jets from the US. The Norfolk station is now home to 18 of the aircraft. Elsewhere, the red ribbon has been cut at RAF Lossiemouth, where the new P8 Poseidon facility has fully opened. 4 of the new submarine hunters have already arrived there, with a further 5 joining the fleet by the end of next year. Squadron leader Mike Fold recognises the importance of the occasion.
It's a great day for the Royal Air Force. We're getting the maritime patrol aircraft capability back, which is fantastic. And this airplane really is at the cutting edge of anti-submarine warfare technologies. It's quite an airplane.
It comes as the Scottish base undergoes a massive expansion and upgrade programme. And finally to sport, SAC Benji Fulker secured a podium finish in the skeleton competition at the Europa Cup in Germany. The RAF and GB skeleton athlete took 3rd spot, with 2 German athletes clinching 1st and 2nd place. The 24-year-old was competing on the track for only the 2nd time, finishing in 24th place there 12 months ago. This has been Reheat on Inside Air.
I'm SAC Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise. That's the sound of the Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team, otherwise known as the Red Arrows. Look to the skies above any major event and you'll instantly recognise the Hawk jets, followed by their iconic smoke trail of red, white and blue. The Red Arrows have been entertaining crowds around the world with their close formation flying and precision manoeuvres since 1965. They began flying Nat jets with only 7 display pilots, and a few years later they upgraded to 9, which saw the beginning of the iconic Diamond 9 formation. If you'd like to be a pilot with the Red Arrows, before anything you must have completed 1 or more operational tours in a fast jet, and have at least 1,500 flying hours. If you are fortunate enough to be selected as a Red Arrows pilot, you can look forward to performing manoeuvres such as Goose, Detonator and the classic Spaghetti Break.
Coming up next time on Inside Air, we'll be looking at how the RAF is responding to the high-tech and ever-changing domain of space and asking, are we ready?
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.